Welcome to Executive Insights. My guest today is Philip Poulidis, CEO and co-founder of ODAIA, a Toronto-based AI startup that's already making an impact in the digital health space. In this episode, we explore the digital pivot in the pharmaceutical industry and why data and AI-powered decision-making is critical for finding efficiencies in pharmaceutical sales activities. Philip offers his perspective about how to embrace technology as an opportunity for those in the industry who might be reluctant to change. Hi, Philip. So great to reconnect today. Welcome to Executive Insights.
Thank you, Nasheen. It's great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Philip, you have a very interesting background in both corporate leadership and startup ventures in Silicon Valley and in the Silicon Valley of the North. You're also known for scaling up startup companies and attracting big players. What got you interested in the digital health space and co-founding ODAIA?
I was very fortunate to have been introduced to the founder and CEO of Lark Health back in 2013. Her name is Julia Hu, and this is down in Silicon Valley. The introduction was made because of my prior entrepreneurial experience in scaling my startup, my previous startup, from both software and hardware, and then pivoting it to a SaaS software only play. And Julia at the time was looking to do the same, to pivot away from hardware. They had a wearable device that was tracking people's sleep patterns with an AI coach to help them make incremental improvements on their sleep. And being in the hardware business is very, very tough. So I was introduced by a VC, and I helped Julia and the team pivot away successfully from hardware to being an AI-powered virtual care provider for chronic disease. But that's not what got me interested in digital health. What got me interested is seeing the real impact that a solution like Lark was having on people's lives, and to be able to do it at a really, really big scale, not just one-on-one type of assistance and coaching, but to be able to do across millions of people simultaneously using an AI platform that is highly scalable. This is what Lark provided or proved is possible by scaling a virtual diabetes coach to over 2 million people. And then testimonials started rolling in from people in terms of how their lives were really changed by having this virtual coach literally guide them through their chronic disease. That, together with Julia's personal story in terms of how she started the company, why she started the company, because she grew up with an undiagnosed chronic disease. And it wasn't until her pediatrician took the time to work with Julia to log her food intake, log her activities, her stress levels, in order to determine what are the triggers that are leading to her attacks. And that's what she built Lark around. She was inspired by that, and she built Lark around that concept of being able to help millions of people by being that personal, sympathetic, empathetic coach. And when I saw the power of what digital health tech can do when delivered at scale, it really got me interested in that space. And that's one of the reasons why when we, with my co-founders, spun ODAIA out of the University of Toronto, even though a lot of the early work wasn't in the healthcare space, the algorithms and the technology that we took out and brought into ODAIA to commercialize, we found a very good place for it within the pharmaceutical industry, with the goal of everything we do is all about getting the right therapeutics to the right patient at the best time possible, because the way things are being done right now is not very efficient. And so bringing that efficiency to that industry on the commercialization side of things in terms of getting the right therapy to the right patient really resonated with me. And it all stems from having seen that kind of impact with my early involvement in Lark Health.
That's a fantastic story, and you're really pursuing a mission with life-changing impact. The COVID-19 pandemic has forced many industries to rapidly and drastically change their business models, and life sciences is no exception. What trends have you observed in terms of digital adoption in the pharmaceutical industry since 2020?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, we've all seen how the global pandemic has accelerated digital adoption for both consumers and businesses. Pharma is definitely no exception to that. Over the past number of years, even the last decade, pharmaceutical companies have been very open to adopting new technologies such as AI and machine learning for the purposes of drug discovery and making clinical trials, for example, more efficient, or in helping identify potential candidates for clinical trials. The use of technology, AI, has been prevalent for the most part on those parts of the pharmaceutical industry where they were not really adopting or using big data analytics or AI and machine learning was on the commercialization side of the business. It's when that therapeutic is ready now to be promoted, to have the education being taken out to the physicians, and really finding the physicians that are treating the right patients that are optimal for that particular therapeutic. AI, machine learning, data science hasn't really been used on that part of the business within pharma, but the pandemic has forced a change in that particular area in a significant way.
Yeah, that's really good to know. And it certainly is consistent with some of the studies that I read recently as well. And pre-pandemic, only 2% of pharma sales activities are conducted virtually versus over 90% today. So if a pharmaceutical sales rep can replace a 5-minute random doctor's office visit with a scheduled 15-minute Zoom call to optimize their conversation outcome and reduce the cost of sale, why should pharma companies care about investing in digital engagement tools such as the ones offered by ODAIA?
Yeah, that's a great question, Nasheen. So first of all, you're absolutely right. A lot of studies have been done over the last year that have shown the complete shift, and this has been a 180-degree shift from the old way of doing business in terms of getting sales folks from pharmaceutical companies to go into clinics or hospitals even to visit with physicians and to educate them on new therapeutics, for example. That has completely changed. And I've seen the same studies and the same data, and we actually have the data that we get from our customers that show exactly that kind of behavior shift, which is almost entirely face-to-face, going away during the pandemic to almost entirely virtual. But one other thing that we've observed in our own data and analytics in analyzing these channels of communication is the effectiveness of the different channels that are being used by pharmaceutical companies. Not every channel is made equal, and not every physician is the same. Whereas you and me may be very comfortable sitting in front of a Zoom call pretty much all day because this is my office, at my virtual office all day. For a physician, that's not the case. A physician is going to be treating patients. They're going to be at a clinic. They're going to be at a hospital. They're not going to be readily available in front of a computer or in front of a camera all day. And so one thing that is very challenging these days is the pharmaceutical reps don't know if a particular physician is open to taking video calls, or maybe they prefer text, or maybe they prefer to be sent an email. Maybe they prefer a phone call on a Saturday morning rather than during the week. So this kind of behavior change is something that is highly personal. It is not something that can be categorized across a broad swath of physicians. Each individual interaction needs to be evaluated independently. That's one of the things that our software does, for example, is we look at the totality of all of the channel activity that is being conducted by a pharmaceutical commercial team, whether it's virtual calls, emails, various campaigns, and even comparing them to the prior sales tactics of face-to-face and dropping off samples, for example. All of that behavior we analyze, and we do it on an individual healthcare professional level so that we can then recommend who needs to be communicated in a certain way. How do you communicate to a certain HCP in the most optimal way based on their preference, based on their propensity to react to a particular channel of communication. So that's one thing that we do. The other thing that's very important is the segmentation is understanding, who are the physicians that they need to be targeting, they need to be going after. Who are the physicians that are likely going to be treating a patient that is optimal for that particular therapeutic? And for the most part, it's like finding a needle in a haystack. And that's one of the things that we do with our platform is we analyze, in some cases, patient support programs, so patient level data, anonymized, of course, where we don't have the identities of the individual patients, but we can attribute a patient journey that we track to their likelihood of requiring a certain therapeutic at a certain point in time within their journey. And we can then pinpoint the physician that is treating that patient. We understand the behavioral characteristics of that physician based on which channel of communication has worked in the past, what their preferences may be. And then we allow and augment the selling process for the pharmaceutical reps to help them be more efficient and to help them better get that message across to the right physician that is required at that point in time. And so the trick is figuring out what's working, what isn't working for each individual physician, and to really personalize it.
Yeah, I can totally see that. And I think we as humans are not that great at making predictions. We think we are, but what we're good at is having opinions and passing judgment. So the combination of human plus machine is very powerful. I think data and AI powered decision making has become a critical enabler for pharmaceutical sales in segmenting, targeting, engaging, and activating customers for sure. But the real magic of tools has to go hand in hand with the cleanliness, accuracy, and richness of data. How do you go about addressing the data source and to ensure that it's both comprehensive and trustworthy?
That is such an important question. If you were to ask me if, why didn't ODAIA, come to market 6 years ago, 7 years ago? The answer I would give is because the timing would have been off. And the timing would have been off primarily for the question you just asked, Nasheen, which is such an important one. 7, 8, 9, 10 years ago, even a few years ago in some cases, the pharmaceutical companies that we work with weren't collecting the kind of data that is available to us today. When we go in and work with a pharmaceutical company, the one thing that we do initially is we ask for as much historical data that we can get from their CRM system, from their marketing automation platforms, so that we can train our algorithms on that historical data. And I think the farthest back we've gotten from one customer was 3 years, almost 3 years, nothing beyond that. And so I think this is very telling in that the data collection, the importance of collecting the right data from the right systems within your organization is something that the CIOs and the IT managers and even the business unit heads are now realizing and have started to realize is so critical to their decision-making ability, is having the data and then having the tools in place to analyze that data for useful, relevant insights that they can then take action on. And so, going back to your question in terms of having the right data, it's absolutely true. In some cases, there may be cases where we may have to turn down an opportunity to work with a company because they may not be collecting the right amount of data, or they may not be collecting the right types of data. So it's not just the amount of data, but are they collecting the right type of data? And we work with those companies to help them understand what it is that they should be collecting. And then we can always go back later once they have all of that so that we can apply our AI and machine learning on helping them optimize their commercialization efforts. But in most cases, we're seeing that the pharmaceutical companies we are working with have actually started to do that many years ago. And some of them are getting even better at it as time goes on. The pandemic has certainly helped in accelerate the collection of data. And a lot of them are now building their own internal data analytics teams, which is great. It's really, really good to see. Because as the old adage goes, garbage in, garbage out, right? You put the wrong data in, you're going to get the wrong insights coming out. And so that's one of the things that needs to be looked at. every CIO in every organization, and pharma is no exception, needs to make that top priority. But besides collecting, cleaning, and labeling the data and creating data warehouses where it's easy for vendors to now be brought into the mix, that is another very important piece. It's not so much just collecting it, making sure that the right systems are in place to collect it, but they should also be thinking about creating data warehouses that are an enabler for third-party technologies to be brought in to then layer on top of their data warehouses so that the insights can start flowing. That's an important component too.
Yeah, we discussed the two key elements in enabling digital adoption, which is technology and data. And the third piece, which in my mind is the most important one, is mindset. One thing that we know for sure is that change is constant. However, change is often met with resistance, especially in today's time when automation and bots are involved and often perceived to be a threat to job security by some. What's your advice to those who might appreciate the imminence of change, but are afraid to reimagine a new way of doing business for fear of losing control?
Yeah, this is so important. If I were to look at the changes that are happening in the industry, and the rapid pace by which companies are adopting technology. My advice to the companies that are hesitant or think that they might lose control through the implementation of robotic process automation, for example, which is one of the aspects of our solution at ODAIA for MapJewel, is to automate the segmentation process, which is a highly manual endeavor that happens every year, at least once a year, sometimes twice a year within pharmaceutical industries, is the segmentation of their healthcare professional base and the alignment of their sales teams for each territory. We automate that. Now, could that be seen as a potential threat to perhaps the sales operations teams within pharmaceutical companies that have that responsibility, for example, of doing that segmentation? Sure, it can be seen as a threat. My answer to that, though, would be don't see it as a threat, see it as an augmentation tool. You know, I've often said robotic process automation, you mentioned process automation, it's a very big buzzword these days. I tend to look at what we do as robotic process augmentation. We augment the processes that exist within an organization. We're not there to replace everything that they do. We're there to augment it with automation, with scale, and with AI. And the best way to look at it is don't be afraid, embrace it. If for no other reason other than to experiment with technology, adapt it to your specific needs. And at the end of the day, it's not a question of whether a company can afford to bring in process automation or AI or machine learning. The question should be, can you afford not to bring it in?
Great advice, Philip. I so enjoyed this conversation today. Thank you for your time.
Thank you so much, Nasheen. Nice to see you.
You've been watching another episode of Executive Insights by the IT Media Group. Thank you for tuning in. If you enjoyed this video, please check out other technology and leadership-centric content on our YouTube channel. And don't forget to subscribe